Just welcome everybody. A couple of housekeeping matters. I was mentioning to people that were here earlier, there's a lot of material to cover, so I might not have a lot of time for questions during this time, but what I will do is when you go out, if you walk back and go through the restaurant, there's an area there that has a couch and chairs, and I'll go over there and spend as much time as you'd like with handling questions. Also, if you have a cell phone, if you can turn your ringer off, that would help. And how many of you read the detailed description of what this is all about yet? No? Okay. So I'm glad you're here anyway. But we'll start at the beginning then, because the talk is designed for people that are in a certain place. And so it's important to know what this is, who this is for, so you can see if you're in the right place or not. So I want to read for you something I wrote about who this is for. And so if you can see if you resonate with this. So first of all, the title of today is From Unsettled. See if you feel this some of the time. Do you feel sometimes any of these things? Unsettled, insecure, or anxious? 2, engaged, assured, and anchored. So if you would like that transformation, you're in the right place. If you're not interested in that, this probably is not a good way for you to spend your hour. So I wrote this paragraph to help you to really tune into who I designed this presentation for, so you can see if you resonate with it. Devoted but frustrated. Devoted but sometimes frustrated. Come on in. Are you heart-centered? So I'm asking you this question. If it helps you to close your eyes, you can go inside to see if I'm talking to you. Nobody's here for everybody, right? Right? If you're here for everybody, you're here for nobody, right? Are you heart-centered, purpose-driven, and devoted to growth, seeking to become more, do what you came here to do, and live a full, rich life? Maybe you've explored many paths, tried multiple approaches, maybe even invested in transformation, yet despite all your experiences, you feel some type of existential frustration. You're searching for a deeper fulfillment, but you're unclear on the path forward. You're willing to take responsibility for your life and uncover your blind spots, but you don't quite fully trust yourself to do it all by yourself. So you can open your eyes now. So as this deeply resonates, I invite you to join me for this hour as I guide you to build a bridge to a lived experience your heart truly desires through a process that I've evolved over many decades called the transformational change process. Come on in. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. Oh, thank you very much. Come on. Oh, could someone maybe, yeah, come on in. Come on in. Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I know.
I just didn't want to hold this all the time. Thank you. Okay. So how many of you that resonated with? Okay, you're in the right place. Okay, my people. You're my people, right? Come on in. Okay. Welcome. All right. So the big question, right? The big question is, how do you reliably, consistently move from when you're noticing some sense of feeling unsettled, insecure, and anxious? How do you be with that? And then how do you move into feeling engaged, assured, and anchored to the point where you develop that skill to where you trust yourself? And there's a lot of benefits to developing those distinctions and skills because, first of all, it feels good to shift from point A to point B. But maybe even more important is if you trust yourself to be able to do it, then you're not so afraid when you find yourself in point A again. And that's very important because if you are feeling afraid and you're feeling all those things, the odds of you being able to go from point A to point B are almost zero, right? So that's basically what we're up to. And then another suggestion I would have for how you be today here with me to get the most benefit is let yourself go more inside yourself. Like, I don't think there are any lions and tigers in the room or anything, and everybody's kind of on the same path. So you won't offend me if you sometimes want to close your eyes, sometimes if you want to slow down and deepen your breathing pattern. I'm not offended. I understand. So one other tip I have for getting the most benefit out of our time together today, because normally when you get exposed to a speaker or information, there's a part of your mind that's always assessing whether you agree or you disagree with what the person is saying. And a lot of times that's an appropriate way to be. But in terms of this material, you won't get the most value out of our time together if that's the mode that you're in. What I would suggest that you do is suspend your belief or disbelief about what I'm offering you and just be with what I'm offering you like a possibility and try it on for size and see how it fits rather than making a predetermination if you believe it or not before you try it on for size. You can always discard it later. Okay, so the problem when you feel unsettled and insecure and anxious, the problem, well, there are a lot of problems with that, but one problem with that is if you resonated with that paragraph I read, what you end up with is this sort of major problem is you feel torn. You feel torn, kind of stuck between the life that you know and the deeper, more meaningful life you crave or you sense is there. And there's that gap. And on one hand, that gap could be exciting if you trusted yourself to be able to reduce the gap. But it can kind of compound the problem if you don't know how to get there, because you might try to give up or you might try to drown the pain in some type of distraction or some kind of addiction. And so that feeling of being torn, sometimes when you're in that space, you can be suffering more than a person who's never thought about spirituality at all. You know, they're just happy going to the bar with Joe Sixpack, you know, and you wonder, you know, what am I doing? I'm in pain more than when I started this journey. You know, I think I'll just go back to the Haagen-Dazs or whatever your Haagen-Dazs is. And then what you do is you go back to whatever your Haagen-Dazs is until that becomes even more painful than the other thing. And then you start dabbling back on the spiritual path until that starts to become more painful again. And then you go back to the Haagen-Dazs. And you can do that for a long, long time. without even knowing that that's what's happening. And you wonder why you don't have the momentum that you'd like to have. Can anybody resonate with that? Okay. All right. Yeah, we're all in this together, right? Okay, so I've had the privilege of working with thousands of patients and students over many decades, and kind of distilling the critical path to help people bridge that territory. And some of it falls into what we're going to cover today, which I'd say is about 70% of the path, the bridge, which is the metaphysical components to that bridge. But I want to, for the sake of completion and honesty, I want to say there's about 30% of it, of that bridge, that we won't be getting into today. But it is part of my work. And the 30% that we won't be getting into today is the role that the physical body plays in your lived experience of being a human being. And so we won't be getting into the issues of biochemistry directly intervening with structure, movement patterns, hormonal balancing. That is a lot of what I do. So I don't want to create an idea that this is everything, but 70% is pretty good. And as long as you know that there's more to the picture, that if it was just metaphysical, then what would be the point in incarnating, right? If we're here to be sort of like bridge builders, what bridges are we building, you know? And if you want to build a bridge between, if you let me wax a little poetic for a minute, if we're building a bridge between heaven and earth, you need a body, right? You need to anchor into the human experience some new frequencies, some new possibilities. And so if your physical body has a lot of distortions or is running on a low battery, because you're multidimensional, it not only affects your physical body, but it feeds back into your readiness and your willingness and ability to do deep psychological and spiritual work. If somebody's really stressed out, they're completely inflamed, they're exhausted, their adrenals are shot, you're not going to be able to do deep work with them, even if they, in their conscious mind, they say they want to do it, they can't do it. There's too much noise to hear the deeper signals. It just isn't going to work. Plus, it takes a lot of energy to do deep work as well. So just for the sake of completion, I'm not going to be getting into that 30% today, but it benefits you to understand that that's an important part of the package, and I do that work as well. Okay, so where are we going? We're going to, what's on the other side of the bridge? So on the other side of the bridge, right, is feeling engaged, feeling assured, and feeling anchored or centered. And what's the ultimate prize as opposed to feeling torn? If feeling torn is the ultimate problem, what's the ultimate prize? You want to keep your eye on the prize, right? Is integration, feeling integrated, whole, feeling like you're living from the center of your soul, producing a life that's full of tangible abundance and success, rich with joy, clear purpose, and ultimately meaningful service. So if you don't know what you're after, it's less likely that you're going to get there. So it's nice to know where you're going. So the rest of today is going to be about this particular bridge that I've built that has been very successful for many, many, many of my patients and students. And you don't have to remember it because I'll give you an opportunity at the end if you want to give me your name and if you want to send me an email and just say that you want a copy of the transformational change process cheat sheet, whatever, I'll get it to you. So you don't have to go into that having to remember mode. You can just stay in that being inward mode and thank God for technology. So there's 5 steps to this, and we're going to take probably 40 minutes and talk about it. But if you really want to take a deep dive and master this, my experience is it takes about a dedicated practice to really integrate it and have it be just who you are and not something you have to think about. You're really looking at probably about 4 to 6 months of a pretty dedicated study, but at least I'll give you a map of the territory today, and maybe if we have time, maybe a little taste of it. Does that sound good? Okay. Just curious, how many of you, as you were listening to me, were also partially tracking your breathing pattern? And how many of you were completely unconscious about that? Okay, that's something interesting to notice because it turns out that consciously breathing is one of the quickest ways to build a doorway between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind, because you will breathe subconsciously if you're not thinking about it, but you can think about it and you can alter your breathing pattern to be more appropriate to what you're attempting to be or accomplish. So that's just a little tip there. All right, so here are the 5 steps. Number 1 is awareness. If you want to master something in the way that I'm speaking about mastering something, that possibility is meaningless by definition if you're not aware of what you want to master, if you're not aware of where you are. You know, if you're at point A and you want to get to point B, if you don't have an awareness of where you are, I don't just mean where you are physically, I mean what's occurring for you now as a multidimensional being. Not only where are you physically and what state is your physical body in, and what your body posture is and your breathing and your facial expressions. I'm talking about that, but I'm also talking about more than that when I'm talking about point A. I'm talking about thoughts, moods, attitudes, feelings, expectations, beliefs, memories, fantasies, intuitions. The spiritual path is nothing if it's not an increasing commitment to awareness. Okay, so that's the first step in this process of building this bridge. So let's go back to the big picture, right? Building this bridge from unsettled, insecure, and anxious and torn to engaged, assured, anchored, and integrated. And what we're doing is we're describing a bridge that if you actually can not just think about these steps, but actually do them, I've observed scientifically over decades, the result will happen. That's a bold claim, and I'm making that bold claim. I made some notes here. Transformation begins with acknowledging what is asking for your attention. Could be anything from a fire that's burning in your house to an inspiration that you have that's a calling, and anything in between. Could be anything you're aware of, right? What's calling your attention? Are you paying attention to what's calling your attention? Do you have a commitment to that kind of mindfulness? Do you even know that that mindfulness is possible? Do you realize how that type of awareness is critical to having the possibility of going from point A to point B? If you don't have a certain critical mass of commitment to being aware of what you're aware of what's present, the odds of you ever going from point A to point B in a sustainable way, where this becomes your come from mode of being and you don't have to think about it, is zero. Is zero. It's zero. Okay? So that's the first step is, and again, I'm giving you a taste and a conceptual framework. It actually, like I said, it takes mindful practice for months for most human beings to basically integrate it to the point where it becomes unconsciously competent. You guys familiar with the phases of competence, where first you're even unaware that that competence is possible, right? And then you realize that you're consciously incompetent, right? And then you have to be able to be with that uncomfortableness. And if you can do that, then you can go to this place where you're consciously competent. And if you stick with that long enough, you'll eventually get to the place where you're unconsciously competent. Like I don't have to think about how to put my left foot in front of my right foot. I'm unconsciously competent about that. And so to actually get to the place where you're most of the time unconsciously competent about this bridge here, it takes some dedication. But I can tell you from my own personal experience in working with thousands of people, if you stay with it and you see the value of it and you see the consequences of not attempting this and you really get into it, the fruits are really amazing. So that's step one, is awareness. And that's what I mean by awareness. Okay. Now, step two is the simplest one, but it's the most difficult one, if that makes sense. And I'll try to give you a sense of why that's so. So the second step is allowing. The second step is allowing, accepting what it is you just became aware of. Let me go over that again. The second step is accepting all of what you have become aware of. I'm going to spend a lot of time on this because from working with thousands of people, this is the most difficult one. Okay. So it has to do with the way we're wired just by being born into Western civilization that's based on a worldview that's basically an extension of Newtonian physics. Okay, what do I mean by that? So the more you become aware, what tends to happen? Well, when you become more aware of what's going on, some of the things you become aware of you like. Some of the things you guys with me? You guys breathing? Okay. I mean it. I mean it. I mean it. When I said, are you breathing? This isn't easy stuff. This is stuff where you've got to kind of alter your pace a little bit, where you can't listen passively. You kind of have to be almost on the edge of your seat with these issues. So can you see that if you became more aware of your room, or you became more aware of your relationship with your significant other, or if you became more aware with uh, anything, can you see the chances are some of what you are now becoming aware of you kind of like, and some of what you're becoming aware of you don't care much one way or the other, but some of what you're becoming aware of you don't like it. And we're thrown into a culture where the default setting, when you come up against something you don't like, is to judge it and to try to move away from it, to try to avoid it, to try to get rid of it, to justify it, to rationalize it, to go unconscious about it, to go back to your Haagen-Dazs. Let me tell you something I promise you. If you get stuck in any of those ways of being, this bridge we're building won't get to the other side. You'll go like this, and you'll say, God, Dr. David, before I started doing this, I felt better than I feel now, because now I'm becoming more aware of what I don't like. And I don't know how to be with what I don't like in a way that works. And you'll throw tomatoes at me and give me bad reviews. No, I don't want that. And I don't want that for you. Now listen, seriously. What I just told you is why the spiritual path is so tough. What I just told you is why the spiritual path is so tricky. What I just told you is why probably 999 out of 1,000 people can't do it all on their own without some guidance. Because it's tricky business to see the back of your own head. It's really tricky business to discover what you didn't know you didn't know. That's really tricky business. It turns out that in the metaphysical realm, it's always to your advantage to accept and allow your awareness. Let me say that again. In the metaphysical realm, it's always to your advantage to allow your awareness to be what it is. In other words, in the metaphysical realm, if you're wasting any energy pushing against what you don't want, you're hurting yourself. But you're thrown to be that way. You're thrown to listen. You're thrown to push against and try to push away and avoid and justify and rationalize what you don't like. Especially if it's something you discover you don't like in something you really care about, like yourself, or like this special person, or like your profession, or like your religion, or like your teacher, or like your son, or like your mother. That's not so easy. It's not so easy when you wake up and smell the coffee and you realize that somebody you thought was loving you was pulling your chain. That's a tough one. That's a tough awareness to just allow, isn't it? But that's the price of admission. If you're really interested in spiritual mastery, that's one of the big prices of admission, is to get to the point where you actually are engaged in the inquiry, is what I'm saying true? That in the metaphysical realm, it's always to your advantage to allow your awareness, because by the time you become aware of it, it already is your awareness. So to try to push something away that already is existing, and instead of allowing it to be there so that it lets you be. Okay, tip number 2. Whatever you can allow to be will allow you to be. Let me say that again. Whatever you are willing and able to allow to just be what it is will allow you to be who you are, who you really are. If you can allow a thought to just be there, not believe it, not disbelieve it, not indulge it, not push it away. If you can be with that thought, if you can be with a feeling, if you can be with a body sensation, it will allow you to be. Whatever you are unwilling or unable to allow to be will shape and constrain and limit what you have access to being. And this is very, very counter to probably the way your default setting is hardwired. And this is one of the reasons why the spiritual path is so challenging. And the funny thing is this is actually the simplest step. It doesn't take any energy to let what is be what is. But from an ego-based point of view, it's the last thing you would think of. In fact, I'll say something even more radical. From an ego-based point of view, this way of being is literally unthinkable. Because the whole ego-based logic system is based on friction, resistance, comparisons. So that's a radical statement. You don't even need to understand what I just said. It's not important to understand that concept for where we're going today. But for some of you that are ready for that, I put that out there. So, where are we on this bridge? Awareness, then acceptance and allowing your awareness of whatever it is you're aware of. And I want to make a point that might not be obvious, because your awareness is what's occurring for you. But a lot of times when you think about what's occurring for you, you're thinking about objects or other people. But I want to make another assertion that you can test out in your own experience. And that is that I'm not only occurring for you, the room's not only occurring for you, but whether you're conscious of it or not, you're also occurring for yourself. You have a self-image. You're occurring for yourself. So when I'm talking about accepting what is and being aware of what is, I'm including the way you occur for yourself. And unless you're in some incredible flow state or some samadhi state, I guarantee you occur for yourself. It might be, your sense of yourself might be a conversation that's going on in your head, but you do occur for yourself. Unless you're in some kind of deep sleep state or you're in some kind of flow state, you do occur for yourself. And you want to know something weird? Is if you've ever been in a flow state, did you notice that in the flow state, you're not occurring for yourself? Let me say that again. If you've ever been in a flow state, do you notice that in the moment that you're in the flow state, the way you normally occur for yourself is not there? I'm going to say that again because that's really weird, but it's true. Have you ever noticed that when you're in a flow state, the you that you identify as you most of the time isn't there? What does that say about the you that you are most of the time? Doesn't it say that the you are that you are most of the time is just a mental construct? Food for thought. So that's the I've had students where they were trying so hard and they almost gave up a bunch of times. I've had patients and students that spent the better part of a decade getting step 2. And if you don't get step 2, sometimes you want to kill yourself if you tried to get it long enough. And you definitely want to go back to the Haagen-Dazs because it's extremely painful to be committed to increasing awareness without the commitment to acceptance and allowance. In fact, let me make another bold claim. Awareness without acceptance is hell. If I was a mean person and I wanted you to be in hell, that's how I would do it. I would have you become aware of everything and not accept anything. It's that important. It's that important. You know, it's the reason people have, one reason people have such a hard time with step 2 is that it doesn't take any effort. It's too easy. And people are too addicted to struggle and pressure and pain. Life is painful. I hurt. It's too easy to let what is be what is. It slips in under the radar. But let's say, by the grace of God and your teachers and you, let's say somehow you get some critical mass of ability and facility with step 1 and step 2. Now we move to step 3. We move to hump day, right? Wednesday, right? It's that darn word, responsibility. Now, what I don't mean by responsibility is guilt, blame, shame. You know what I have to say about that? It's a very technical term. That's what I have to say about that. Okay. Transformation is only possible with ownership of your journey. I mean, after all, whose journey is it? Well, my mother made me do it. That's why I am the way I am. Right? You've all been there. You've drank the Kool-Aid. Well, what would that mean? That would mean in order for you to change, your mother would have to change. Well, that's a great way to live, isn't it? Sign me up. You know what I have to say about that, right? Okay. I tell people, you can't take it back to the cosmic store and ask for a full refund unless you realize you bought it. You didn't always create it, but you bought it. Maybe somebody told you you're not smart enough. You're not pretty enough. Life's just work hard and be a good person and everything will all work out. Don't speak up. Obey your father. We got a zillion of them in there, don't we? I'm not saying you created all those thoughts. Some of them you did, but a lot of it you just bought it. You just agreed to it, and you didn't know you agreed to it, right? But whatever it is, you're not in diapers anymore, and it's your journey now. And if you stay in a victim mode, what are the odds of building this bridge? 0. So there's something you need to understand about responsibility, besides that it's not shame, blame, or guilt. It's just taking a stand that you have some agency here, right? So there's a little fine print with responsibility that I want you to be aware of, because the lack of awareness of this hangs people up without knowing that they're hung up because of this. So I want you to use your imagination, and I want you to picture a triangle. I want you to do this with me right now. Don't just think about doing this, but actually imagine a triangle. And imagine at one angle of the triangle, you have responsibility. Okay, now I want you to imagine that at another angle of the triangle, you have freedom. And that at another angle of the triangle, you have power. Here's a news flash. The weakest one in that triangle will limit the whole triangle. If you're not willing to claim your divine authority, your power, that will limit you. If you're not willing to be responsible, that will limit you. If you resist the responsibility and power that goes with freedom to the point where you don't want freedom, that will limit you. So there's a lot of ways people suffocate the possibility of sustaining responsibility, but I'm just giving you a little clue about where you might look if that's an issue for you. Okay? You think about the Constitution of the United States, and if you look at it as an experiment to see if people can be responsible enough and claim their own power enough to handle that degree of freedom, it's an interesting way to look at it. And it helps you, it gives you some power from which to understand some of the challenges we're facing, not just individually, but also collectively. So we explore resistance to possibility. We untangle responsibility from guilt or blame as you shift from a sense of passive frustration to empowered action. What do you think the fourth step is? No, not yet.
Forgiveness.
Yes. 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 Anything, person you're not willing to forgive tethers you to that unwanted situation. It closes down your access to love, to your heart, to the sacred heart, to the center of your soul. And it's important to understand that when you forgive somebody, you're not saying, I approve. You're not saying, I like. You're not saying, I'm going to hang around for more. You're not saying, I agree with you. You're saying, no matter what I or somebody else did or said or didn't say or didn't do, I'm not going to give my power away and use that as a reason to close down my own connection to love. That's stupid. If you think about it, that's a stupid thing to do. You're not going to get to the other side of the bridge hanging on to a bunch of resentments. It's just not going to happen. You know why? Because every resentment is tied into lots of judgments. Judgments close down the heart, and they're a poor substitute for real discernment. I'll give you another tip about forgiveness. If you're working with that step, there are 3 flows I would recommend that you pay attention to when it comes to forgiveness. Number 1, forgiving others. Number 2, forgiving yourself. And number 3, something that a lot of people don't even think about, is giving other people permission to forgive you. A lot of times that's a step that hangs people up because they've never even thought about it. They've never even thought about being willing to give other people permission to forgive them for all the times they were acting unconsciously or fear-based. So you're right on. That was a very powerful step. What do you think the 5th step is before you really are free metaphysically and you've really gotten all the juice out of this? What do you think the last step is? Nobody? Gratitude. When you can get to the point where you honestly not only have the attitude, but you also have the feeling of being so grateful that you've become aware of this and you've allowed it and you've owned it and you've forgiven it and you've learned everything you can, and you're so grateful that it's happening now. It didn't happen. It's not happening 5 days from now. It's not happening 5 months from now. It's not happening 5 years from now. It's not happening 5 lifetimes from now. But right now you're completing this. Right now you're getting it. Right? It's that attitude and it's that feeling. Transformation deepens through gratitude, through anchoring the shift from what appeared lacking to what now has been realized, has been learned, has been discovered, and being a good steward of that pearl. So if, and it's a big if you've really done the work in relation to something in particular, obviously you could go through this, and I recommend you go through it thousands of times with different things you've become aware of, right? Start with simple things. Do it with a chair. I'm serious. Start with a chair and take the chair through all these steps. Then take a plant. Then take an animal. All right? Build up to it. Here's a little tip. One of the ways people set themselves up for failure is they want to practice on their biggest problem first. Right? No, it's too hard. I'm hugging dust. Right? Right. Okay. Okay. No, that's just self-sabotage. That's just being violent to yourself. Okay. So what's the end result of this? The end result of this, if you've really done the work, is now you have a new space in which to be. Here's a news flash. Nothing exists without the space for that to exist. Most of us are so focused on content and maybe process a little bit, but we don't realize that none of that can exist without the possibility of that existing. Without the space for that to exist, it can't exist. So you've literally created a new space for yourself. Now, 3 things can happen. 3 things can happen. One is you can simply go unconscious, and then the inertia of all your patterns will refill that space. That can happen. And it does happen sometimes. It's like the person that goes on a cleanse and then they break the cleanse by going to McDonald's. That's a very violent thing to do to yourself. You're blindsiding your liver, right? Okay. But people do it. We do it. Because this space, we're not used to this spaciousness. There was a movie back in the 80s called The Unbearable Lightness of Being. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like if you're used to being constrained and now there's this space, you might feel a little wobbly. Like, gee, is that real or is that real? You know? So that's one possibility that I'm alerting you to. You could just fill that space with what you had before. In other words, this possibility doesn't take anything away from you. You still have the freedom to choose to go back to exactly where you were. Okay? There's another possibility. Out of that space, you consciously think of something you want to bring into existence, something you want to become more intimate with, something you want to manifest. And then you use your physical and metaphysical skills to increase the likelihood of bringing that into existence. That's a completely valid, workable thing to do. So that's not big news. But the third possibility is something many people don't consider. And that is to hang out in that spaciousness without trying to make anything happen. And why that's powerful is that this stillness, this still spaciousness, is one side of the coin of reality. But the other side of the coin we could call perfect motion. So out of perfect stillness and perfect divine right timing will emerge perfect motion. In other words, imagine an ocean and imagine waves coming periodically. On one hand, these are unique waves, but on the other hand, it's all the ocean, right? Okay, now, some of those waves, metaphorically speaking, are meant only for you. You have a unique love that resonates with unity. And as you become more sensitive to that unique love that you are, you become more discerning about what's the wave or what's the perfect motion that has your name on it, that's meant just for you. And that's another way to be with that spaciousness that most people don't know is a possibility. Okay. So, what I'm sharing with you is this possibility of being able to actually master the process of transformation, to actually master the process of going from awareness to a new preferred reality that's not gonna snap back very easily. It's rooted. It's rooted in something that's really real. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap it up, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go out past the restaurant, and I'm gonna go to that room where there's chairs and couches, and I'll hang out and answer your questions. And if anybody would like to have a copy of basically what I covered and would like to have some further would like to have some further communication with me, when we're out there, just ask for my business card and it has my email address on it. So I want to thank everybody for the quality of your attention and care, because it looks like I'm up here doing it all, but I can guarantee you I'm responding to you very, very, very much. So I really value the quality of your attention today. So thank you so much. Okay.